Welcome to the podcast where relationships, confidence, and determination all converge into an amazing, heartfelt experience. This is Speaking from the Heart.
Welcome back to episode number 130 of Speaking from the Heart. Today we have Matthew Magiapane with us, and Matthew is a skilled motivational speaker with 12 plus years of experience as a marriage and family therapist. He works with groups, individuals, couples, and families to teach coping skills, focus on solutions, rethink how they approach stressors, and connect with their supports to work together on their recovery. Matthew is a lifelong Long Islander in New York and is a devoted husband to his wife of 5 years and a father to 2 toddler boys. I think in this episode, we really try to dig into a way to be heard. And being heard in my realm of public speaking is completely different from somebody that works intimately with a relationship or even family coaching atmosphere for that matter. But even therapy in itself takes a whole other dimension in which, if it wasn't for even therapists in my life to get me to where I am, I don't think I would even be able to have a lot of the conversations very openly about what we need to do to be able to work through some of the crises that we walk into in our lives. Matthew's perspective on a whole variety of different things that he works with to even create that association, let alone even create the excitement to be able to move that path forward in his clients and my clients' perspectives, all have different ways to move into that whole new world that we can all experience. But we have to remember that even if we have all these different starts and stops that we have going on in our lives, it's all about how we keep moving forward, how we can keep pushing ourselves to see things that we never thought we could see inside of ourselves, especially if we're trying to function in this ever-changing world. But with that, let's go to the episode. All right, we're here with Matthew Magiapane. Matthew, thanks for sharing your heart with us today.
And thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. I thank you so much. And from somebody that is a motivational speaker and also a therapist, I'm excited about this interplay that you have to share with our audience today. So Matthew, I've already let a little bit out of the bag with what you provide to our audience, with what you have shared with us. But I really want to start off with the fact that you've been a motivational speaker for over 12 years. And it's funny because I've been learning the craft of speaking for the same amount of time. So I'm kind of curious, what got you into the speaking world and what helped you to really share some of the content that you share with the audience? And maybe you can share what some of those subjects are.
Sure. So motivational speaking and speaking in front of crowds was not something that came easy for me. I recall the classes we had to take in even as early as high school, where you would do public speaking and attempt to learn how to stand in front of an audience and not wave your hands too much and not yell too loud. I was always incredibly nervous, incredibly shy about it. And I recall this class I took in college, in undergrad. It was an economics class, and each one of us had to present about a specific topic. It was maybe a 5 to 10 minute conversation. We just got up in front of the class and spoke, very simple. And I remember nervous up until I got up in front of the classroom, and I looked around, and there was that moment where I just said, hey, I'm in the same boat all these people are in. We're all nervous about this. Half the time, we're not even totally listening. We're stuck in our own little worlds too. And that anxiety maybe not went away completely, but it really dissipated. And ever since then, I found it a lot easier to just get up in front of people and talk, or get in front of groups and run groups, which I've done in the past as well. I've talked about different topics, more or less in the mental health field. One of the earliest conversations that I had was in front of a classroom of students, just talking about what it looks like after you finish grad school and try to get into the work field, because that's always something, especially in the mental health field, a lot of students are concerned about. What's out there for them? What are they going to find? Are they going to be successful? Can they shift around if something's not working? So what's it look like really job hunting in the first place? And one of the most recent ones I've done, I was in a conference in the city for an agency that I also work for, where we were talking about, it's called CISM. It is a crisis intervention team, CISM. It's nationally recognized, and my direct supervisor is trained in it and had brought me onto the team not long after I started in that agency. So I shared parts of that particular subject where we're talking about how we will respond to crisis situations. It was a group of about 200 people in the room, and we set up a panel, and I explored how we would meet with clients when there's a crisis or how we handle things with other staff members. When you're working in this field, there are things that can happen very unexpectedly and sometimes very traumatic. And having a team like that internally that allows us to respond to people who are struggling is something that you don't see everywhere. So it was a great chance to share something that really is very unique to our agency.
I had a friend from college many years ago. We kind of lost contact, but she used to do crisis intervention work. And I know that work was certainly being developed at that time, even just a decade ago. This newer concept, although it's been around for many years, I think the level of importance for it has been gaining significant traction. And I'm curious, what has been maybe I don't want to say the weirdest thing, but maybe the craziest thing that you've experienced being part of that team? That when I say the word crazy, it might have had a lot of high intensity. It might have had a lot of different moving factors. Obviously, I don't want you to share any of those names because I know that that's confidential, but I wonder if you could share a little bit of that unique experience that you had for our audience.
Sure. So I've had some situations happen to me directly where there's been physical altercations between residents that have happened at some of the sites that I've overseen. And with some of the teams that I've worked with, sadly, we've experienced some deaths and some very unexpected ones. I currently work within a program that houses homeless veterans and provides mental health services on top of that. And over the years that I've been in that field, in that particular agency, we've seen a number of substance abuse deaths. One particular instance, one of my staff members had been walking the property and saw that somebody's door was open, and she swore she saw a pair of shoes sticking out. She went over there and sadly found that person had passed away. And that was a traumatic thing. It was something we discussed very in depth. It was one of her clients that she had only worked with for a short period of time, but had been developing a good working relationship with him. And we explored what that's like to not only walk into a kind of situation like that with seeing somebody who is either incredibly medically compromised or had passed away, and having that relationship with them where you're meeting them on a weekly basis, talking about how they're trying to improve their lives, what they're doing to move forward. And it's very difficult not to get attached to some of our clients. I've had clients in private practice that I've seen for multiple years, and at some point the therapeutic relationship ended mutually, but it was a very difficult thing because these are people that you get very attached to, and you see their growth and you see the positivity and so forth. Really, when you're dealing with crisis situations, there's so many facets to it that come into play. And unfortunately, it's the crisis management team because there's trauma and crisis that happens. And we have moments where it's just, like I've said, a fight between two residents that we have to get in between. I had a big physical altercation happen at a Christmas party that we were hosting once. That was quite interesting.
I should have thought that Christmas would come into play here, because that's like the biggest holiday that a lot of mental health issues occur for obvious reasons, lost family, things of that nature. Yeah.
Yeah, we had two people that just did not get along and they just could not de-escalate, and we had a number of staff involved, and it was quite a sight. Thankfully, nobody was seriously hurt, but that would be the most unusual one I've been through because it was such a pleasant evening, and then all of a sudden you see something break out, and unfortunately that's what happens. And we do our best to try to respond and be there for everybody involved, and even those that maybe weren't directly involved but know the people that were involved, because that could be just as upsetting too.
You said something earlier about having these connections with the people that you're working with and trying to keep that separated out because you're really trying to help them with not only building a new skill, maybe going through the different types of things that are happening. It's funny because with a coaching relationship, I always think about it as I'm going into it. I want to help this person. I'm part of that team process. So I even tell my clients, we're going to be circling the wagons here to make sure that you get to a better place. But with the line of work that you do, it's totally understandable why you have to have that separation. I know that there's certain things that are ethics relating to that are involved, but I've always been curious, and I think some of my listeners might be too. How do you cope with having to keep that separation and not getting too attached to a situation that might be overwhelming? Because I think that for me, if I was in your shoes with something like that, my heart would ache constantly with all these different situations that people are facing. So I'm kind of curious how you process it, address it, and maybe how you teach others to do the same.
Absolutely. If I said it was easy, I would be a liar. It has its moments where sometimes it's easier than other times, but it's hard. You develop relationships with people, you develop connections with people, you see the progress, and sometimes you see the failures too. And you very easily can find yourself rooting for that person and doing everything you can to try to help them out. But at the same time, you start to excuse a little bit of the little things. Oh, they were late for this appointment. It's okay. I'll give them some slack this time, or we'll meet with them next week because I know they got stuff going on. And it starts to blend a little bit. And that's when it becomes more difficult to really face and address the problems that somebody is actually dealing with. There's always that adage of leave your work at the door. That's very difficult when you're working in the mental health field. And I imagine in a lot of other fields too. Of course, keeping privacy and HIPAA laws and such in mind, discussing these things with people who aren't directly involved in the treatment of that particular client can be difficult. But that doesn't mean you can't utilize support systems and resources that you have. I found that talking with colleagues is always wonderful, even if they have no experience in that particular scenario or situation. They still could have a perspective or a worldview or even ideas that you didn't necessarily think of. And I think that's a pretty universal skill to utilize that some people just don't think of. It's very easy to come out of a session, a 45-minute session with a couple that were just yelling at each other and blaming each other for everything, and then thinking, how do I deal with this? I just got out of a yelling match that went on for 45 minutes and I have no one to talk to.
Yeah.
But sometimes you do and you don't realize it. Don't say the names. Don't talk about specifics. Try to avoid anything that can give out any identifying information, but say, I just had a session with two people that was really difficult and it took a lot out of me. Let's go bowling or something and get my mind off of this, or let's go grab a drink and some food. And there's many things that people can really identify as coping skills for themselves that can be utilized, not just for that self-care aspect, which I'm always a big fan of, but also to help you when you're trying to come down from a particularly difficult situation, or if you find yourself so enmeshed with a client that your heart breaks for them on a regular basis. That's not good for you either, because then you can find your emotions getting a little too overwhelming, clouding your ability to work with them from a therapeutic perspective. And I certainly encourage people to identify even just the smallest things that they can do for themselves to de-stress or reach out to somebody. My go-to for me is I listen to music. I play guitar, very, very much a hobby. You're not going to see me on the stage anywhere, but it's something that can help me get my mind off of something, or I could play along with a song that I really enjoy. Two dogs, which are running around the house at all times, and they're a joy to play with when they're not biting at me.
I have to tell you that I know that this is an audio-only podcast, but I love seeing your dogs right now just roaming around. And they've been so polite, so they haven't been barking at us. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, fingers crossed they stay that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're my little background distractions. And I am married and I have two children, and I found my wife to be a tremendous support for me. And some of my closest friends I've had since high school, I've been lucky enough to still be friends with, have been great resources, if not necessarily to talk about everything that's going on, but to maybe distract me a little bit or help me get my mind off of a particularly difficult week I had with some clients. And I think everybody, if you're able to take a few minutes to yourself, it doesn't have to be written down. You can keep it in your own head. You can talk with someone about it, whatever way works for you. But I think everybody can really identify at least a couple things that can help them, even if it's very, very basic. We like those basic things, sitting down and reading, watching Netflix for 3 hours, whatever it is. If it brings that joy to you, sometimes there are those moments where it's really helpful to do it, even if it doesn't feel like it's going to help. Maybe it'll just distract you for a minute or two. I'm a big advocate of that self-care.
Self-care is so important. That's part of my story, Matthew, for sure, that I didn't take that time for myself. That led me into my suicide that I attempted over 4 years ago. Thankfully, I failed, and I'm here and being able to do that. And I know for many people too, trying to find that intentionality, that hobby, that aspiration is sometimes even a struggle in itself, especially if there's financial reasons or other things. But there are plenty of free things out there that we can all engage in that would satisfy that need, which One last thing I have to ask you before we move on and talk about MJM Wellness, which is the business that you're running. Is there something common across all your clients that you would recommend, maybe even say to our audience today, that might be a first stepping stone to resolving some of the issues? Because I feel like we talk about substance abuse, or we talk about mental health, we talk about alcohol, we talk about feeling like we can get over anxiety, depression. There's a common denominator that I feel that if we resolve what's on the surface, that could actually start to form that healing process. And I know you've worked with numerous people. I wonder if you've seen that common trend, and maybe there's something you could recommend for somebody that might be dealing with it in their family, they might be dealing with it with themselves. Is there one thing that maybe you can share that might help them?
I would say one of the biggest things that I've noticed over the years is that stigma of reaching out for help or going to therapy, whether it's professional or even just reaching out to your own individual support systems. The mental health field over time, thankfully, has gotten more and more accepted and open, and people are a little more willing to reach out when they're looking for help, or they'll do the research to find a good therapist or to get into a group, which groups can always be a wonderful thing as well. But there still seems to be that pervasive hesitancy, whether it's based around that stigma of there's something wrong with me if I'm going to therapy, or if I'm going to therapy, at this point, it's just over with anyway. What's the point? My family doesn't believe in therapy. I grew up not believing in therapy. Whatever the reason might be, I've found that pretty common, that first big step is just engaging with some kind of professional therapeutic services. And my big statement is it's okay to reach out for help. Reaching out for help does not mean that there's something wrong, or that you can't handle it yourself, or that you're incapable of handling it yourself. Sometimes there's just things we just need that extra push for, or we need somebody else's perspective, or we need a professional who specializes in a particular issue or concern or mental health disorder that can guide us and teach us coping skills or help us better understand what we're dealing with. I think that's wonderful that you are open about your own experiences, and I'm very sorry that happened, but I agree. I'm glad that you failed. But I've dealt with depression myself. I've had those moments, especially when I was younger, of having some suicidal ideation. It's very difficult when you're in that mindset and you feel alone and you feel like you don't have an outlet, or you don't have somebody who can help you. And I would say for the vast majority of people, there is somebody. It takes a little bit of effort to look sometimes, or it takes that support. Reach out to somebody you really care for and say, listen, I just need somebody to help me make that first phone call. Or maybe you can come with me to my first session or my first group, or maybe we can just talk about this a little bit so I can get the courage and the strength to set something up with somebody professional, or to get some kind of help that will really benefit me. My biggest point here is just knowing that you're not alone, and it's okay to reach out for help. There's nothing wrong with that.
For all those reasons, in the episode notes for my listeners, you're well versed on what this is all about. 988, it's a great resource to check out. It isn't just the phone number that you can call when something is happening. There's actually a website dedicated to all kinds of different situations and how you address them. I've been a frequent flyer on that website myself, checking out all those various resources. So I'll put that in the episode notes. And Matthew, you said something so important about the fact that it's just about starting that conversation. And for myself, it took me a very long time, even after I started therapy, to open up about that, because it was a lot of trauma. There's a lot of things. And that's why I will always say, if you need that professional help, go see a therapist. Don't go see a coach. Therapists are trained to go through that process. And I highly encourage that. Even if you use a coach to help you along the way, you should always include a therapist so that you're on the same path in that process. So with that said, Matthew, you've been doing this for over 14 years. I've noticed this on your website, MJM Wellness, which I'll also put in the notes. I think that small business is so important. So congratulations on not only having this, but also building this out. I'm just curious, what got you excited to actually enter into your own practice?
It's funny, I was just having a conversation with somebody about this earlier today, how I fell into the mental health field. I've had an interest and a fascination really in mental health for many, many years, going back to high school, but I didn't really grab onto it until I got into undergrad. I had entered school not knowing what I was going to do exactly. So I just took a whole smattering of classes just to hit those prerequisites. One of them happened to be a Psych 1 class, which I absolutely fell in love with. I thought it was fascinating. It grabbed me right away. That was it. Declared my major and went forward. I took some time after undergrad. About a year and a half, I worked and eventually decided to go back to school and had gotten into a marriage and family therapy program, which I had never heard of. That's what ultimately turned into my license here in New York. And as I was going through that grad program, particularly, there was so much about it that opened up my eyes to this whole field of mental health that I really was unaware of, even from my 4 years in undergrad. It was very focused on couples, on families, and issues with sexuality and everything you could think of, which are just things, many of which I hadn't encountered myself. And the more I learned, the more interesting and the more exciting it was to me. In that grad program, we would intern, we would have our sessions recorded. And I remember very early on, about 3 weeks in, I was really struggling. I wasn't really talking much. I had a third-year student who was the one guiding the sessions I was sitting in. And during one of the supervisions that we had, my supervisor had pointed out to the class, very embarrassing. I probably turned as red as my shirt. Matt's kind of quiet. He's not really engaging. We got to get him to talk a little more. That next session, I engaged with a father and his 2 children. He was separated from his ex-wife, and the parents would come in separately with the children. But I was able to engage with the kids so much and get them talking and active. And they were drawing for me and talking about their family and vacations that they went on. And they just completely opened up. And I remember that next supervision I had, my supervisor pointed it out and said, "That is what we're looking for. Matt, you just turned this around like a full 180. And that was it. I'm like, that's it. This is what I'm doing with the rest of my life. I've been lucky enough where I've found that really when I was still in school, and from there kind of built it up over time and worked for private practice for a few years, and then ultimately decided that this was something I wanted to do on my own because I had such a passion for it. Not everybody is so lucky, but it's really helpful when you can try different things and see what fits. And I was one of those people who found something relatively early and going forward as much as I can with it.
It is always a gift and a blessing to be able to find that calling early in life. I didn't find my coaching business until I was 35 and figuring out things finally with all the things that were happening in my life that I wanted to do this. People were telling me I should do it. I was not listening to them. I was not having anything to do with it. I was resisting change, but I finally realized that was denying what my ultimate best version of myself is. So I'm glad you found your best version. That is really important. You touched on mentorship, essentially. Somebody took you under your wing. You got to learn so much information from them. Do you do any sort of mentoring for other people today that are interested in being a therapist or doing the line of work that you do? Obviously, since you've opened a business, I'm sure you got a wealth of knowledge. So I'm wondering, is there a couple people, you can give them a shout out if you like, if you think that it would be worthy of being able to share a little bit about their details and how they got to where they were at, if you don't feel like you would embarrass them. But I'm just curious if you had anybody in mind that you've been able to take under your wing and kind of do the same.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's certainly some people in the veteran mental health side that I do where I'm working with a number of case managers that are always looking into what's their future going to be like, what kind of planning are they going to do in terms of really what their career is going to look like down the road. Is it going to be a private practice thing? Are they going to stay in this particular sect and move forward with mental health housing, or are they going to see what else is out there? I've seen over the years a number of staff that I've had just straight sit down conversations with, and we've talked through the difficult clients that they've had or difficult situations they've encountered, talked about some of those successes and pointed out what they've done specifically, and even discussed meetings that I've sat in with them with clients and really brought to their attention the good things that they're doing that they may not necessarily recognize. We all can benefit from some kind of mentor or some kind of guiding force. It's always helpful, especially when you're entering something new. When I started pursuing my own solo practice, I have a family member who lives in New Hampshire who really taught me a lot about how to get this off the ground in my own way. So I still am having my own guidance and mentorship coming in my direction, because it's always helpful to hear what other people have been through or some other tips or advice or guidance that somebody can give you. And I try to do that with really anybody I'm working with, whether we're at the same level of staffing, or if I'm their supervisor, whatever the situation might be, I'm very much one who believes in growing yourself and trying to foster that in other people too.
It's about not just paving the road forward for those people, but you're right. It is learning even other things that you can learn along the way that you can impart on others. And I've been so fortunate enough myself too in my business, being able to help others, even with this podcast, being able to have that conversation. I had a woman on the show, Kanisha, if you're listening, hi, that we challenged each other about even starting those businesses and getting to that figure that we really want to achieve in terms of revenue and wanting to help others. But you're saying too, something that I think sometimes we miss out in society, especially with the way some of the epidemics that we have going on, drug use, I think of fentanyl, all those things. What would it be if we just had somebody that would help mentor, maybe steer people in the right direction? Just that accountability. Sometimes it's just that little step that makes a big difference. I don't know what you might think about that subject too, because you probably encounter a lot of those different aspects in your counseling that you go through. Do you find that sometimes it's just about having somebody there to help, whether it's just in the small things instead of the big things when it's too late? For example, I see so much of, well, if they were just able to intervene early by just having that conversation on a weekly basis, like a teacher, like that could make all the difference. I mean, do you think that a lot of the things that you encounter could be solved with something like that? And I know it's just your opinion, but I'm kind of curious because you've seen a lot of these come through your door.
I certainly feel that even just those little things can make a big difference. And a lot of when I've dealt with clients who are dealing with any kind of ongoing substance abuse issues or mental health concerns, sometimes their support systems or their family members just don't understand. How come he can't stop using this? How come he keeps going and doing this? How come he's spending time with these people? And they start to pull away, and the client starts to feel more and more lost or unsure of where to turn to. And sometimes having that voice or even just that shoulder to cry on can really make a difference, because suddenly they feel heard, and they haven't felt heard in months or years or even longer than that, especially when they're dealing with something that's getting them on the track to multiple rehab stays. I have a particular client who's been in and out for many years. He struggles on and off, and when he's struggling at his worst, unfortunately, he turns towards substances even after he's completed successfully rehab programs. It's a coping skill he learned that he has a tremendous amount of trouble breaking, but I'm somebody he trusts. I'm somebody he'll talk to. He'll call me and let me know, I'm going to be going to rehab. I'm struggling again. And even just having that person you can talk to and open up and explain without judgment can really go a long way. And that's kind of the key there, is that no judgment, because we all do it. We're all guilty of it, and it's completely human to do that. But when you're trying to help somebody, and this is something I try to teach a lot with the couples that I'm working with too, is trying to listen as best as you can without judgment or blame. And I think that goes in both directions incalculably.
Yes, I even say that too. Stop blaming yourself. It's not what you've done. It's whatever's happened. The past is the past. You recognize it now, and that's a big, important step. So what can we do to navigate those steps moving forward? And we worked on that together, even with what I do in coaching, because we have these roadblocks that kind of stay in our way if we don't move them out of the way. And sometimes we need someone else to help you move it.
Mm-hmm. It's okay to ask for a little push.
Yeah, it's okay to ask for a push. Yeah, absolutely. We should. Matthew, we're almost at the end of our time, but there's one final question I want to ask, and it's actually something that you have on your website, which I want to share with the audience too. It's listed under your About page. It's about your philosophy, just so you have an idea what that is that I'm going to ask you. So it says, at MJM Wellness, I believe that everyone has the potential to lead a fulfilling and meaningful life. My counseling services are designed to help my clients unlock their potential and achieve their goals. That made me smile because I have somewhat of a similar mission here at Your Speaking Voice LLC and what I've opened up. To you, and this being my final question, I want this to be something that you kind of take personally and maybe give some words of wisdom to the audience today. Do you think that you're leading that potential to lead a fulfilling and meaningful life from what you're doing? And also, do you feel like you have the potential to unlock your goals? Because I think that you're starting to do that with this business and what you have been achieving over your impressive career. But I'm kind of curious, what are your thoughts about you walking the walk and doing that talking with your clients. What does that mean for you?
Mm, that's a good question. And it's great that great minds think alike too, that we have a similar philosophy. I like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So reaching that potential and understanding your own strength can be one of the most difficult things that a person can do. There are going to be days where you feel it fully. There are days where you're going to just lay in bed and say, what's the point of getting out of bed today? It's just another day. Reaching that potential is hard, and accepting and understanding that it's hard is what can help you grow. I have had stops and starts with everything over the years. I've been through my own personal situations. I've been through traumatic events that have occurred in my family. I've had on and off relationships that have been good, bad, toxic, you name it. And I've pursued different things. I've pursued different areas of the mental health field. Even though I was lucky enough to find my calling fairly early, that doesn't mean it was smooth going the whole way. It certainly wasn't. And I think recognizing that you're going to go through those situations and come out of it on the other side is very important, because when you're in those situations, you don't feel like you're going to come out on the other side. Tomorrow's not going to get much better. Next week's not going to be much better, or this situation is not going to improve. I'm going to be stuck at this job for the next 20 years without any changes. But then when you get to the other side, you look back and it's very, very infrequent that you're going to say, oh, it happened exactly how I predicted. Instead, you're going to be thinking, wow, I got through it and look where I am now. And look at the strength that I utilized within myself that at that time I didn't feel like I had. And that's something I try to keep in mind whenever I'm moving forward with whatever it is, whether it's growing my own personal business or working in the field in general. I try to sit and think, what are the things that I've done and what are some of the difficulties that I've overcome? And even in those days where it's really hard, it's okay to be upset and have a bad day. We all do. But knowing that you can get through it and you can move forward with it and you can find something new if you really want to, can keep you going. And that's what keeps me going. And the good support of my wife too. I have to throw her in there as a little extra bonus, because I'm very lucky to have somebody like that who has knowledge beyond what I have in different avenues, especially in the business world. She's the smart one. She's the social one. I'm the mental health guy. She does everything else. And if it wasn't for her and her knowledge and her education, I would not even know half of the things that I know. So recognizing who in your life can help you and who's willing to help you, which I think there's more people out there who want to help you than you think, especially at your toughest and most difficult periods of time.
Yes.
So recognize that and recognize your strength and know that you absolutely can do it. Even if there are those days where it doesn't feel like it, you'll have days where you feel like it. And that's when you strike, when that iron's hot.
Yes. And knowing that you have that circle, those are people that are willing to help you, that sometimes can be the biggest obstacle. I know I surrounded myself with very toxic people and had to do that exercise of who do I want to have surrounding me? And you have that awesome wife that does all that. So hi, wife of Matthew's. Thank you so much for not only supporting Matthew, but also making sure that he stays on track.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Hey, I already knew for a fact that that was probably what was happening, so I went ahead and did an assumption. Matthew, we're at the end of our time, but I want to give you the last few minutes to pitch MJM Wellness. How can people reach out to you if they're interested? I know you do some over the internet calls. I know that you might be looking in the near future possibly to have some space that you can meet clients in person, and maybe you can share a little bit of that if you can. But how can people get in touch with you? I'm going to give you the last few minutes to share all that.
My website is mjmwellnessny.com. You can go on there and you can actually schedule appointments directly through there for individual, couple, or family counseling. I also provide simple 15-minute consultations. There's no cost to those. That's a chance for us to meet and just discuss what kind of issues or concerns you'd like to address in therapy and see if it's a good fit. I'm a big believer that you have to feel comfortable with your therapist before you continue therapy. So those little consultations help people get over some of that stigma I was talking about previously. My social medias, I have Instagram, Facebook, MJM Wellness NY. I keep a blog on my website as well, where I'm posting different bits of information about concepts in the mental health field that might relate to you, or skills that you can build, anything that might be helpful, hopefully with whatever situation you might be dealing with. It might prompt you to say, hey, let me give this guy a call and see if I can try out a session and see if it works. I'm currently doing it telehealth primarily. Video or phone only is acceptable. it's nice to see somebody in person, but not everybody has the capability. And eventually, yes, we are going to be having some office space as well for in-person sessions.
Wow. I loved our conversation for the fact that not only you sharing the importance of why we need to have crisis counselors, why we need to have therapy, why small business is important. You've touched on so many different subjects, but what I find fascinating about your story, Matthew, is that all it took was a few people to surround you and be like, I see this in you. I believe in you. And I think we oftentimes don't see that in our own lives when we see those signs. We have to be paying attention when those happen. And I think that you have been paying attention to not only listen, but to also help others. And for all those reasons, thank you so much for being on Speaking from the Heart, sharing your story, sharing the fact that your dogs and your wife keep you sane, and the guitar playing, because I probably wouldn't be able to do the guitar playing, but I would love to have a dog. But honestly, I think that your mission is not only aligned with what I'm doing, but it's aligned with what we should all be doing. And I think that work is so important. So thank you so much for sharing all of that with us today.
Thank you. It was really wonderful to speak with you. And it's very nice to connect with somebody who has a similar philosophy and worldview on things, because it always makes you feel like we're all going in the right direction together.
Absolutely. We are definitely doing that. So thank you, Matthew. I want to thank Matthew again for being part of the show. And I really appreciate therapists all across the world that have a variety of different clients, whether they are helping them with specific needs, whether that is in an individual or group setting, or even a completely different type of situation overall, which I've been having the privilege of meeting so many different types of therapists through this show, being able to share their perspective. But I think we have to learn that with each perspective, though, it creates a content. It creates an opportunity to engage in a way that maybe sometimes isn't so easy to do, because we have to remove those barriers, especially if we need a CISM to help us, really a crisis intervention team to come in and save us when the world is falling all apart, when it's falling all around us, especially when it comes to substance abuse, alcohol, and especially even in cases where I've been through mental health crises. And I think that's really the biggest thing about this, is that you don't know what you're necessarily walking into. And Matthew talked a lot about those different aspects, even with some of the clients that he has worked with. Being able to blend those problems that everybody has and dealing with them, especially with the way that privacy and even HIPAA laws are, especially in the United States, or anywhere in the world for that matter, protecting confidentiality, means that we have to learn to understand some of the problems that we have with some people without being able to reference it with somebody else, which in a way is a handicap if you think about it. But at the same time, do I want everybody to know my business when it comes to what I'm dealing with everything that I might have as problems, especially trying to move forward? Really, it's about understanding what is the association. Who are the people that we can really confidently talk to be able to work through a variety of different problems that we might have in our life? It means being able to start with the context of what we're trying to work through, which sometimes we even don't know, even as coaches or even therapists for that matter. And I really envy the fact that we have to work through all those things to have us understand how we can create those best relationships, have confidence to work with these individuals, but be determined to see what their progress will be at the end of the day. It's really about helping them get through some of the things that might be on their mind. I've always been interested as one of those people looking afar about playing the guitar, maybe sing a little bit of karaoke if I can get my voice up to a better range. But even more importantly, I want to learn ways in which I can take a step back, which even in my own life, even during these summer months, I'm trying to do a lot better about doing that. Although sometimes the demands of even the business, let alone even a full-time job, can keep me quite busy trying to be able to do that. But it's all about perspective. It's all about trying to understand and learn how we can create those balances in our life, whether it is work and life. Reaching out, especially not being shy about exposing those details that we really need to be working on, those minute aspects, are something that I think Matthew and I really have a good understanding about. I think that we have to understand, though, that some people are not prepared to have those kinds of conversations, let alone even work through some of those situations because they're afraid of what it looks like to be on the other side. They're afraid of what it might mean to be able to work through some of those problems. And especially talking to someone that you might not have ever met before can be some of the most challenging things that you ever experience, especially when working with somebody that seems like they might know what they're doing, but maybe they don't quite get everything that you're supposed to be knowing about them as a whole. Which is really why I'm listening to you, my listeners, about the importance of not only exposing what that looks like, not only understanding what it means to work through some of those problems, but in reality, you have to be not shy and be able to reach out to others to help you get to that other side. So there's really a duality of being not afraid of what you have going on in your life, but at the same time, being able to communicate that, which are two separate actions in themselves. Even for me in the coaching industry, I have to dig deep. Sometimes some of the things that we are actually saying about ourselves might not actually be the truth, the reality of what's really important. It might even be something completely different. Sometimes the people that I work with have some type of executive functioning happening in which people have to be able to make some kind of decision about what they would need to do in their life. And sometimes making that choice, being able to work through some of those situations, are the most difficult things that they have ever experienced in their life. I know for myself that for even the clients that I've worked with, which have ranged from all kinds of various situations in the workplace to even in their personal life, trying to make choices that will better engage them for the future, means that they have to keep working past what they might be struggling with. It also means understanding how to create that excitement of value, showing them that when they get to that other side, that they're going to have a path of freedom that they otherwise would have never experienced. So for my listeners today, I have to challenge you. What are some ways in which you are creating that freedom in your life? Even if it means just freeing up an hour a day to work on something that you haven't been doing for quite a long time. Maybe studying for your next degree. Maybe working on that promotion. That means that you have to spend a little bit more time with some of your coworkers, some of the people to get to know them a little bit better. But maybe it even means working on your budget so that you can plan more effectively financially for the things that are ahead of you overall. That path to move forward also means that you have to look at where we all stand in society, which even in the United States, there's a stigma about veterans and being able to help them with their mental health. And I know of many people that have been working on that avenue. Even locally, I have to thank Shana McDonald of the Interceding Foundation for even exposing me to some of the different things that her foundation deals with. Being able to provide an avenue for first responders, veterans of the military, to allow them to bring even their family, significant others, to be able to expose them to what this community means, to be able to have some freedom, some opportunity to relate to people that might be going through similar struggles. She's creating something in that nonprofit locally in the Harrisburg area that is not only fascinating, but also makes me feel that there's a lot more work that we could be doing to support veterans and their overall situations. But really what's missing from this whole entire conversation that we even talk about even in this episode is about support systems. Finding a way to be heard, whether it's on a stage in public speaking or even just being heard across the room from somebody that you should have been talking to this whole entire time about the problems that you're facing, means that you have to find a strategy that works best. In public speaking, I always talk about the importance of even having your story ready to be talked about, having that connection with your audience so that you can work and interweave, whether it's for informational or persuasive purposes or some other means, to be able to help them see what you're trying to do. Because even if you say something that's on your mind, I know what you're thinking. Am I being judged for who I am? Do they think less of me because of what I'm going through? Does it really mean that I have to be able to unlock the abilities that I have lying dormant inside of myself to be able to then make that message become more effective? And the answer is, as long as you practice it, as long as you keep working on that craft that you believe in, nothing is impossible. Even if you have to keep on starting over and keep on stopping in order to work through some of the pitfalls or some of the roadblocks that come up. It's about moving forward, but it's also recognizing that sometimes we need that help when it counts the most. You know, I've been asked quite a lot about the importance of why I do this show and why I keep bringing on people that have all kinds of similar messages. Because it's to reinforce the same sort of concerns that I know that we are all facing. Whether we say it out loud or not is really up to you. But I think it's also important for us to recognize the discussion that we can have to work through some of these troubles, to work through some of the difficulties that we have despite the HIPAA laws that might be in place. We need to form communities that associate with each other. And whether we like it or not, there is a stigma about getting help, which we need to break today. Even if it is just a therapist that you're seeking to give you more advice in terms of how you can work through some of your past troubles, or even a coach that can help you dig even deeper and help you strategize and move forward with a plan, allows you to be more accountable, but also more importantly, have a plan to put in place for some of the things that you might be going through. I think that's the best step forward, allowing yourself to be heard. Because there's no judgment, and there never has been any judgment for that matter. All you have to say is, yes, I'm ready for it. Yes, I'm willing to work on myself and my voice and my ability to keep moving myself forward. I have to keep learning, whether it's through mental health crises, substance abuse, or even alcohol, regardless of who I have surrounding me in my community. I just have to keep learning about the fact that it's about exposing what is in our insides to the whole world to see on the outside. And not being afraid of what the consequences look like, because when we are not afraid anymore to show that true power, imagine the unlimited possibilities that come unlocked with it. And oh yes, when we're finally heard, nothing will ever stand in our way. And even we might gain an association with some people that respect us a lot better. Thanks for listening to episode number 130 of Speaking from the Heart, and I look forward to hearing from your heart very soon.
Thanks for listening. For more information about our podcast and future shows, search for Speaking from the Heart to subscribe and be notified wherever you listen to your podcasts. Visit us at www.yourspeakingvoice.biz for more information about potential services that can help you create the best version of yourself. See you next time.